Hi everyone, thank you for tuning into this next episode of my video blog. I haven't put anything up recently just because I haven't done an awful lot of flying, and that's only because of the weather in the UK. So the clocks have changed to an hour on GMT, which means sunset is much earlier, and also the weather's just been naff. So pretty much every day that I've had a flying lesson booked, the cloud cover has been really low and heavy, so visibility has been bad, and there's been rain. So I think I've had 3 lessons cancelled in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I said before in a previous video that I was trying to not let it get to me, but I'll be honest, it's like super frustrating when they get cancelled, because all I want to do is continue with the lessons. Also, I found out recently that my flying instructor is sadly leaving the flying training organisation that I'm learning at. So it means that I'll be given to another instructor and will be learning with someone new. I have to be honest again and say I'm disappointed, just because I get on really well with Ben, my current instructor. He's a good fit for my personality, and we get on well when we're in the aircraft. So I'll be sad to see him go, but I guess in the long run it's good to practice with other people, with other skills. It'll keep me on my toes and make sure that I'm not just getting used to how one person operates, and instead can know how 2 different skill sets will help me improve. So I did have like probably the shortest lesson in history about 2 weeks ago. Again, it was another bad weather day. We were going to do climbing and descending turns. The cloud was okay, but I did the takeoff, and as we got to about 200 feet off the ground, the right side of the aircraft was just kind of whacked by a very strong crosswind. It was so strong that we were trying to fly the runway heading, so runway 24, so 240 degrees out of Wickham, but we were having to point the nose of the aircraft all the way to the right at 310 just to go on a track of 240. So I'm pretty sure there's some maths you can do to therefore work out the wind speed and direction, but I haven't learnt it yet. But it was strong. Given climbing and ascending, you want to hold a pitch to maintain an airspeed. Well, the needles were just flying around because the aircraft were bouncing around all over the place, so it would have been impossible to complete the lesson. And I think my instructor did the right thing. He just took control and brought us back into land, and rather than waste money on not being able to complete the lesson, we decided to leave it for another day. But again, pretty disappointing. And also that lesson I'd moved to the beginning of the day because we had some kind of family thing on that day. So I was at the aerodrome at 8:30, and for anyone that knows me, I'm not a morning person at all. So it was quite a wrench to get out of bed, get there and be awake ready for a lesson, and then it lasted, I think, 15 minutes, and that's being generous. But hey ho, on to fight another day. One of the great things about that lesson, even though it was short, I was able to test out my new Bose headset. I've got it here, so you can see it. I imagine most of you have seen one of these before, but that's the Bose A20 aviation headset. I'm not going to put it on because I'll feel a bit silly, but it's really cool. And I was nervous because I got this headset on eBay, and it was from someone who'd used it for like a month and then stored it for a year and had decided to sell it. It cost me £680 on eBay, but I was terrified that when I plugged it into the aircraft it was going to be a dud or something, because you do hear these stories on eBay sometimes. And then of course all of my lessons were cancelled for weeks, so I've had the headset for about a month and was only able to test it just a few weeks ago. But it worked, and I plugged it in and I could hear just like a normal headset, and then you press, there's like a little button, I don't know if you can see it there, you press the power on button, and then on comes this noise cancelling feature, and basically it cuts all of the bass out from around you. So in an aircraft the bass of the engine is really loud, and suddenly you can just hear crystal clear the person on the intercom, and I could hear the radio calls from the tower so clearly. So I was really chuffed with that. Great investment. Like new, they're worth like 900 and something pounds, so I feel like I got a great deal. They're in great condition, so yeah, dead happy with that. And even though the lesson was short, just to walk away having tested them and know that they work was really useful. So since that lesson I think I've had 2 or 3 more cancelled just because of the weather. But yesterday I went after work, and we got up in the air. It was quite cloudy, but the cloud base was I think about 3,500 feet. So we had enough room to do climbing and descending turns. What I did notice though, and I think I said earlier, the sunset now is around 4 o'clock. And so yesterday I took off in the afternoon. And you probably notice it if you drive, but there's this weird light phase where it's not quite sunset and it's not quite nighttime yet, and it's kind of, I guess, twilight or dusk. But the visibility over that time is much worse for me. I don't know whether it's just something to do with how our eyes work, but I find it quite hard to see clearly. And so when you're flying around, it was quite dusky and quite murky. The visibility wasn't very good. And it made it loads harder to make out the shapes of town. So actually keeping a situational awareness was much harder. So I was having to think where we'd come from and the track that we'd flown just to get a sense of where we were. Luckily out of Wickham, when we do local flying, we take off from runway 24 generally, and then we fly north. So generally speaking, as long as you turn back to head south, you'll pick up somewhere like Aylesbury or Risborough and know where you are. But some of the enhanced learning syllabus at the flight training organisation that I'm training at measures you on situational awareness. And of course, last night, as soon as I said to the instructor, "Where are we?" I'd failed that element, which was a bit of a shame. But the lesson itself was really good. So it was a mixture of what I'd learned doing climbs and descents, but adding in turns. So I did the takeoff roll, and then did the right turn onto upwind's leg of the circuit. And when we turn whilst we're climbing, just because the wings lose a little bit of lift when you bank to the left or right, you restrict the bank angle to 15 degrees. But then it's just the same, so you're doing your normal dabble checks, so direction, airspeed, the balance bubble, keeping a lookout of the aircraft and maintaining a watch of the engine instruments. And then descending is exactly the same, so all of those checks, but with power up and power down and the carb heat on, just to keep the engine warm and prevent icing. In fact, that was one of the things that I regularly am forgetting. So before you power back to do a descent, I'm not putting the carb heat on. So it's something that I want to improve in the next lesson. One other thing that I picked up from this lesson, which I think has improved a lot, is taxiing the aircraft. So before, I didn't really understand how to use my feet to make the aircraft do what I want, and I think the instructor was having to pick up quite a lot of slack for that. Also, one of the things that you do before you taxi off is you do a little power check. So you set the RPM of the engine at about 1200, and then you switch to each magneto to see whether it dead cuts or not. And what I was doing when I was ready to taxi, so once I got permission from the tower, was leaving the engine at that setting, removing the brakes, and then the aircraft would roll forward. Whereas actually, what you need to do is set idle power, release the brake, and then gently roll forward. So that was something that I put into effect in the lesson that I just did, and actually you could tell the difference. The taxi felt much more safe and controlled. So yeah, much happier with that. So in my last video blog, I think I talked to you a little bit about doing some revision slides. I'm using those to get the principles of flight methodology clear in my head, and use them to revise for the exams. So I haven't done them yet, I'm about halfway through them, but what I'll do is I will aim to share them in the next few episodes that I do and kind of talk you through them. Selfishly, it's more for me just because it helps me to cement it in my brain, but it might be useful for you too, so I will share it. I also found that Poolies do a set of revision or kind of mock exam books, so I'm probably going to buy those. Poolies are the guys that also do the study books for each of the exam topics, so hopefully I'll get that in the near future. I just want to do a mock exam so I get into the swing of how the exam is structured and stuff like that. It's just I've not done an exam for quite a long time now because I'm getting old, so it'll be good to do those. I think I mentioned in my last blog that I've applied or was applying for the EasyJet MPL through the L3 Training Academy. I've submitted my application for that now. I'm still a bit iffy on the finance side of things, and I'll be honest, I had thought about not applying, because I didn't have the money in place, and I didn't want that to look unfavourably on me for kind of wasting anyone's time if I knew I didn't have the finance. But I spoke to someone at L3, and we discussed, because I know sometimes EasyJet will offer to sponsor a candidate if they're particularly exceptional. Now, I'm not for 1 minute arrogant enough to think that it's a sure thing that I would get those, but you kind of have to be in it to win it, and if I don't apply, then I'll never know whether that was something that an opportunity that I missed. So application is in, I guess now just waiting to hear. I imagine that the assessment centres and stuff for that will be early next year, and given L3 charge for the assessment centre, I imagine that they'll invite me along unless I've done something horrifically wrong in my application. Fingers crossed that that's not the case. So I'll keep you posted on that. As soon as I hear anything, I will let you know. I also saw that British Airways have just launched a cadet scheme through L3 as well, but as far as I'm aware, there's no sponsorship opportunities there, which is why I've not chosen to apply to British Airways, despite it being my favourite airline, and I would absolutely love to fly with them, but hey ho. So I think that's pretty much all I was going to cover in this session. I was just going to let you know of another YouTube channel that I've been watching a lot of recently. Most of you might already know it. It's a channel called The Flying Reporter. It's a chap who flies around in a PA-28 in the UK. He's got loads of really great videos on his page. And I think what I like about it is kind of a bit of a very honest account of what it's like to be a private pilot here in the UK. He's got lots of experience, gives a lot of advice in the channel, but also it's like a warts and all kind of thing. So sometimes he makes mistakes, and he is really good at explaining the mistake, quite often backed up with videos from the experience in the aircraft. And he talks quite a lot about how he would remedy those mistakes so he doesn't make them in the future. So well worth a watch if you're doing your PPL study. I'll put the link in the bio of YouTube, and maybe flash it up on the screen in the edit. So yeah, for now that's everything I wanted to cover. My YouTube link, Twitter and Instagram feed should be up on the screen. So feel free to send me any messages or feedback on there. Let me know if there's anything else that you want me to cover in some later episodes. For now, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll speak to you again soon.